I got home from work a little earlier than usual. It was a Friday night, and I had the idea of having a romantic dinner for Emma. We hadn't spent much time together lately, and I wanted to fix that. Our relationship had always had its ups and downs, but I believed that after 10 years of marriage, we knew how to keep the fire burning. While I was undressing in the hallway, her bag lying on the floor next to the closet caught my attention. It was strange, Emma always put it on a shelf or hung it on a chair. I wouldn't have paid much attention to it if not for one detail, the receipt. It was peeking out of the side pocket of the bag, a white rectangle that contrasted with the dark fabric. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just reached out and took it, not even thinking about what I was doing. It was a hotel, and not our hotel, where we occasionally booked a room for an evening of solitude. A different one. I slowly looked at the date, yesterday. My heart skipped a beat. I turned the receipt over and saw the name of the room, a suite for two. The blood rushed to my head. Excuses immediately came to mind. Maybe it was for her friend? Or was she meeting someone there for work? But I knew the answer. I just wasn't ready to accept it yet. I heard the water being turned off in the bathroom. She was home. I looked at the clock, 6:47 p.m. Normally, she would still be at the office at this time. I put the check back in my bag and took a few deep breaths. I felt my fingers shaking. I had to play it cool, take my time. Find out the truth. The bathroom door opened and Emma stepped into the hallway. She looked normal. Her hair was a little damp, her face was without makeup, and she was wearing my t-shirt, which was always too big for her. She looked like nothing had happened. She saw me and raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Oh, you're home early?" she said calmly, wiping her hands on a towel. I forced a smile. "Yes, I decided to finish early." "How was your day?" She flinched a little, but it lasted less than a second. "A normal day. Clients, calls, piles of paperwork." A lie. I knew she was lying, and it made everything inside me shrink. I took a step toward her, hugged her around the waist. She didn't tense up, didn't pull away. On the contrary, she gently put her hands on my chest. "I was thinking maybe we could spend the evening together," I asked, leaning down and touching her forehead with my lips. Emma smiled, but it was fake. "I would love to, but I'm a little tired." "Can we just watch something in bed?" I nodded. "Yeah, sure." I could see right through her. I knew she wasn't tired. I knew she just didn't want to spend time with me, and I was going to find out why. Later, when she fell asleep, I lay next to her and listened to her steady breathing. The room was semi-dark, with only my phone screen glowing faintly in my hands. I opened the browser and typed in the name of the hotel. A few minutes later I was calling the reception. "Good evening, Riverside Hotel, how may I help you?" I forced myself to sound confident. "Good evening. My wife was here yesterday. Emma West. She left a personal item there, and I was wondering if it had been found." A short pause. "Yes, let me check." I clutched the phone until my knuckles were white. "Yes, Ms. West was here yesterday. She stayed in a suite for two." I closed my eyes. "Do you remember who she was with?" The receptionist's voice changed, sounding wary now. "I'm sorry, but we can't disclose information about guests." I took a breath and spoke confidently, as if it didn't matter. "I just want to be sure that it was her friend," as she said. Silence again, and then, a tall man in a dark suit. He was wearing an expensive watch. He looked serious. "I'm sorry, I can't say more." I slowly took the phone away from my ear. The darkness in the room suddenly seemed even thicker. I turned my head and looked at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully next to me. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear every beat in my own ears. She had betrayed me, but the question was different. With whom? I put the check on the table and just looked at it. A white piece of paper, plain looking, but it burned in front of my eyes like living proof that something had gone wrong. Yesterday, Emma said she was working late, and complained that her boss was overworking her. But this check. Hotel. It's dated yesterday. And not some motel on the side of the road, but a 5-star complex where one room costs more than our rent for the month. I didn't want to think the worst. I didn't want to immediately assume what I was assuming. But it was already in my head, throbbing in my temples. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She answered almost immediately, her voice sounding familiar, soft, warm, the way it always did. "Hi," I said, forcing myself to sound natural. "How are you?" "Oh, I'm so tired." She sighed. "My boss made me stay late again. I just got home a little while ago." She paused for a second. "How are you?" I looked at the check. "I'm fine," I answered, not sure what to say. "What's for dinner?" I ordered sushi. "Have you eaten yet?" "No, I'll get something now." "Okay. See you soon." She hung up the phone. I sat in my car, parked outside the supermarket, and just stared at the windshield. She was lying. I didn't know why. I didn't know what she was hiding, but it was a lie. I didn't go home right away. I went to the hotel. The concierge was friendly, a little too friendly. When I walked up to the desk and smiled, he returned the favor. "What can I do for you, sir?" I pulled out my check. "Hi," I tried to sound calm. "My wife was here yesterday. I found this receipt in her jacket, and to be honest, she's a little forgetful. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay, you know." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your name, sir?" I gave it. He looked at the computer, flipping through the lists. "I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone with that name among our guests. She could have registered under a different name, or..." He looked up at me again. "The room was charged to a card in the name of Emma West." My chest tightened. "Yeah. That's her." "Everything was fine, sir. She was alone." He was surprised. "I'm sorry, but we can't disclose, please." I didn't mean to beg, but my voice betrayed me. I was on the verge. The concierge hesitated. He looked to the left, to the right. And leaned a little closer. A tall man, expensive suit, looked confident. A businessman, perhaps. He spoke quietly, but the words hit me like punches in the stomach. "Are you sure?" I brought them champagne myself. It took me a few seconds to force myself to nod. "Thank you," I said, but my voice was no longer as calm as it had been at first. I walked out of the hotel and felt the world shake a little under my feet. When I got home, Emma was already asleep. I looked at her in the darkness of the bedroom. She looked the same as always. The same features. The same calm breaths in and out. The same woman I had lived with for so many years. But something was wrong. Something was broken, and I couldn't fix it. I picked up her phone. My heart was pounding. I knew her password. The phone unlocked. No messages. No suspicious contacts. I found recently deleted. It was empty. Emma knew what she was doing. I sat in the dark, clutching my phone. She knew, and now I knew, too. I was awake. Emma was breathing calmly next to me, her body moving slightly in time with her sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, focusing on every sound, the humming of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant noise of cars outside the window, the rhythmic ticking of the clock. I replayed every detail in my head, the hotel receipt, the words of the concierge, the erased messages on my phone. It was no longer just a suspicion. It was a certainty. I slowly got out of bed, trying not to wake her, and quietly left the room. The living room was dark. I sat down on the couch and stared at my phone. What to do now? If I just told her, she would lie. I knew that. She'd find an excuse. She'll turn the situation around and make me look like I'm paranoid. I'd seen her do it to others, throwing out quick, manipulative phrases, making people doubt their own words. I couldn't let her do this to me. I opened my laptop and started searching. The next day, I left work early, saying I wasn't feeling well. In fact, I was following her. She said she would be late for work, but at 5:17, I saw her leaving the office, wearing dark sunglasses, even though the sun had almost set. She got into a taxi and drove away. I followed her. The taxi was going to the city center. I kept my distance, following her through the traffic lights. Finally, the car stopped in front of a tall residential complex that looked more like a hotel for the elite. It was one of those places where you don't even get in without special permission. She got out, looked around, and quickly walked through the glass doors. I parked across the street. She went upstairs. I could see it through the big panoramic windows. She went to the balcony on the 12th floor. She took out her phone and texted someone. Then the balcony door opened and a man appeared next to her. He was tall, confident in himself. A businessman. I felt something squeezing my chest. She turned to him. He put his hand on her back. I pressed the camera on my phone. A click. At home, I waited until she fell asleep and picked up her phone again. I knew I wouldn't find anything in the recently deleted section, so this time I decided to dig deeper. I went to the notes. It was empty. I went to the navigation, and then I found it. One of the last saved addresses was the exact location of the same residential complex. I looked at the screen for a long time. It was not the first time she had been there. I was sitting in my car in front of the apartment complex and couldn't bring myself to move. My mind replayed what I had just seen. Emma. The man. The same balcony. His hand on her back. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just her boss. Maybe they were really discussing work, but then why lie to me? Why say she was at work if she was here, in an expensive apartment, with some man? My heart was pounding in my chest. I could have just left. Go back home, pretend that nothing had happened. But I knew I couldn't. I had to find out the truth. I had to. 15 minutes later, the door opened and Emma walked out of the building. She was no longer wearing her glasses. I could see her face. It was calm. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look like she had just done something wrong. She looked relaxed. I watched her get into a taxi. She didn't want to stay the night. A minute later, he got out. I focused on him. Tall, confident. Well dressed. He didn't look like he was doing anything wrong either. No rush. No fear. He smoked, calmly inhaled the smoke, and then got into a black Mercedes. I grabbed my phone and quickly took a picture of the license plate. I had to know who he was. I couldn't sleep that night. Emma came home, acting as if nothing had happened. She got into bed, turned her back to me and fell asleep. I was staring at the ceiling. In the morning I went to work, but I did everything I could to find information about that car, and I found it. A black Mercedes. It belonged to a man named Robert West. I stared at the screen. The last name was West, same as my wife's. A coincidence. I put the name into the search, and then my stomach clenched. Robert West. Businessman. Former owner of a large company, officially declared dead 4 years ago. I read it again, dead, but I saw him with my own eyes only yesterday. How could he be alive? I had two options. Either I was crazy in seeing a ghost, or I was being deceived about something much bigger than just betrayal. I went home. Emma was in the kitchen, cutting vegetables. How was your day? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I went over, pulled out my phone, and put it in front of her. Photo by Robert West. She abruptly stopped cutting. I saw her hand tremble. She recognized him. For the first time in all that time, I saw a real reaction on her face, fear. I looked at Emma. She was looking at the photo. The kitchen was quiet, only the sound of the refrigerator and the barely audible sound of water running from the tap. Her eyes were glued to the phone. She didn't even blink. I could see her shoulders tense, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the knife. She tried to hide it, took a slow breath, but I could see everything I needed to. She knew. Where did you get this? She asked calmly. I didn't answer, I just stood there and waited. Emma slowly put the knife down on the board, took a towel, wiped her hands, took another breath. Her expression changed. She straightened her back, her eyes turned cold. Is this a joke? You know damn well it's not. She paused, then hummed, Nick, you're acting strange. I didn't say anything. She sighed, folded her arms across her chest, and looked at me with the same expressive indifference I'd begun to notice lately. What do you want to hear? The truth? What kind of truth? I stared at her. Why are you dating a man who was officially declared dead 4 years ago? And then she finally couldn't help herself. Her face changed. I saw her eyes widen. I saw the corner of her lips twitch. It was a second. A moment. A barely noticeable micro-reaction. But I saw it. She knew I knew. Now the game was really on. Are you watching me? Her voice was sharp. I found the receipt. I stepped forward. I went to the hotel. I asked the receptionist, you have no right to go through my things, you had no right to lie to me. She wanted to say something else, but I continued, I followed you. I saw where you were going. I saw who you were with. I found out who he was. Emma was silent. She didn't deny it anymore. She didn't pretend I was making it up. She just stood there and was silent. So what now? She asked coldly, you're going to tell me what's going on? She slowly sat down on a chair. Her eyes were heavy. I thought you wouldn't find out. Her voice was flat, without emotion. I thought I could keep it under control. I clenched my fists. What exactly did you keep under control? She paused, and then she said 3 words that made me feel cold inside. He's not dead. I didn't say anything. I just listened. He faked his death, she said. Her voice was hollow, to avoid investigations. His company was being investigated. He was suspected of financial fraud. He had many enemies. It was the only way out, the only way out. She nodded. We had been planning this for years. I felt the blood rush to my head. She looked me in the eyes. Yes, Nick. I knew it from the beginning. The room fell silent. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a simple betrayal. It was more than that. You're lying to me, Emma hummed. No, I'm not. Why did you help him? She looked at me like I was an idiot. He's my father, Nick. He's a fraud. It's none of your business. This is my marriage. She rose slowly. Her eyes grew dark. You think this is about our marriage? She took a step toward me. Do you think this is just a story about betrayal, isn't it? She tilted her head. Nick, you don't even know what you're getting yourself into. Her phone vibrated. She looked at the screen, and her face tensed. I snatched the phone out of her hands. She didn't have time to react. There was a message on the screen. Does he know this? Get rid of him. The sender, Dad. I looked up at her. She was looking at me silently. I felt everything inside me shrink. Are they trying to take me away? Emma didn't answer. Are you serious? I took a step back. It's not what you think. I laughed. Are you serious? I clutched the phone in my hand. I started to shake. Emma, what the hell is going on? She didn't answer. Answer the fucking phone. He's not going to hurt you if you just back off. I stared at her. Do you really think I'm going to walk away after all this? She didn't say anything. Tell me one thing, Emma. I took a step toward her. Is this what you want, too? She didn't say anything. Answer. She looked at me. Her face was blank. If you don't leave me alone, Nick. I held my breath. What? She was looking right into my eyes. This is going to end badly. I felt something snap in my chest. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a sentence, and I realized, I am useless to them. They would not let me leave. I had to act. Otherwise, they would do it first. I don't know how long I stood in that kitchen. My mind was working chaotically. My feet were fused to the floor. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to explode. If you don't leave me alone, Nick, this is going to end badly. Emma looked at me, waiting. She wanted to see what I would do. She wanted to see if I had already broken. But I hadn't. I took a deep breath. I will not let them destroy me. I will strike first. The plan had to be perfect. It couldn't be simple revenge. I couldn't just snap, yell at her, make a scene, kick her out of the house. She was smart. Her father was even smarter. If I made a careless move, they would turn everything against me. They will say I am dangerous. They would use my anger as proof that I was unbalanced. I needed proof, real proof, the kind that would destroy them both. First step. I installed the cameras. I didn't know when I would need them, but I had to be prepared. Small devices that could be hidden in the ventilation, behind the TV, in the kitchen cabinets. I recorded every conversation we had, every message she sent, every phone call. The second step, I found an ally. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who hated this family as much as I did. Sophia, her mother, the only one in this family who didn't lie to me. I wasn't sure she would believe me. I wasn't sure she would help me. But I knew she hated Robert West, too, and when I showed her the evidence, her eyes filled with tears. I knew they were hiding something. She put her hand over her mouth as she read the messages from Emma's phone, but I didn't know it was that bad. Sophia, I need your help. She looked at me. Her face changed. She was no longer a crying woman worried about her husband and daughter's lies. She was a warrior. What do you need to do? Step 3. We set a trap. Everything had to happen in the same house, where they felt safe. I knew Emma would go there again. I knew Robert would be there. I prepared the cameras, connected to their security network. Sophia helped me access Robert's old documents, his fake accounts, fake financial documents, correspondence with people he owed millions to. We had proof that he wasn't just a fraudster, he was a criminal. The punchline. We were waiting for it, and now it happened. Emma came to see her father. I followed their conversation through hidden microphones. He knows, she said. How much? Robert asked calmly. All of it. This is problematic. He's not going to back down, so we need to make him back down. I heard him open a bottle of whiskey and pour himself a drink. What are you afraid of, darling? He's not the same as before. He's weak. No, Daddy. He's changed. Pause. And then his voice changed. We need to move faster. Emma didn't say anything. Robert exhaled. Do you think he can do anything? Emma was silent again. A stupid man who can't see past his own nose. Dad, if he finds out more, we'll be in trouble. He took a sip. Get rid of him. I heard something slam. What? Emma gasped. Get rid of it. We don't need it, Dad. I can't. You can't. His voice was sharp. I've done everything for you. You wouldn't be who you are without me. Emma didn't say anything. There's no choice, darling. I pressed the record button, and there it was, the proof. Robert West isn't just a con man, he's ready to take me out, and that was enough. I called the police. The ultimate trap. I broke into their house right before they planned to act. Emma's eyes widened when she saw me. What are you doing here? I didn't answer. Robert gave me a cold look. You're an idiot, Nick. I pulled out my phone and pressed the play button. His voice echoed in the room. Get rid of him. Emma put her hands over her mouth. Robert frowned. You fucked up, West, I said. He slowly set the glass down on the table. What are you going to do about it? I heard the door open behind him. Nothing, I said, shaking my head, but they will. The police burst into the room. Put your hands up. Emma grabbed her head. Robert clenched his jaw. He realized it was over. I've won. And this time they couldn't stop me. I sat in the car, clutching the phone in my hands, and looked at the darkened windows of the house Emma had just disappeared into. She didn't even turn around. She just got out of the taxi, looked around, and quickly disappeared behind the glass doors. And me, I continued to sit there like an idiot, as if that would help me understand everything that was happening. But I already knew the truth. I saw it with my own eyes. I could feel it, like a sharp metal taste in my mouth. She went to him again, to a man who hadn't officially existed for 4 years. I couldn't just go back home. I couldn't lie next to her in bed again, pretending that nothing had happened. I realized that if I didn't do something drastic now, she would just play me for a fool. I went to the only person who could answer my questions. Sophia opened the door almost immediately. She looked as if she had just stepped out of the shower. Her hair was still damp and her simple, homely sweater fit her thin body in a way that made me notice for the first time how tired she looked. Not like a person who just didn't get enough sleep, but like someone who was tired of all this life. "Nick?" she whispered in surprise, tilting her head to the side. "We need to talk," I said, clenching my fingers on the steering wheel as if trying to restrain myself. She thought for a second, as if hesitating, but then nodded and stepped back, inviting me inside. Her house was nothing like I had imagined. I thought she lived in something like a museum, with antique furniture, expensive paintings, and perfect order. But here it was, cozy, books stacked on a table near the sofa, a blanket thrown carelessly over the armchair, a cup of unfinished coffee on the kitchen table. Everything looked as if a woman who was used to being alone lived here. "What happened?" Sophia asked, closing the door behind me. I walked forward and threw my phone on the table. There was a photo on the screen, the same building Emma had just entered. Sophia looked at it for a long time. Then her eyes met mine. "She was there, wasn't she?" "Yes," I said. "And it wasn't the first time." Sophia exhaled slowly and ran her fingers over her temples. "I knew this would happen one day." "Did you?" I took a step toward her, feeling my voice grow sharper. "Sophia, did you know he was alive?" She didn't answer. But her silence said more than any words. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you known?" Sophia wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to protect herself from my words. "A long time," she whispered. I felt something inside me burst again. "And you did nothing?" She raised her head sharply. "What was I supposed to do, Nick?" Her voice suddenly trembled. "Call the police. Tell everyone that my husband is a fraud who faked his own death." "Do you think anyone would believe me?" I was silent. "I tried," she continued, "I really tried. But he was always one step ahead. And when I realized that I couldn't change anything, I just gave up." I sighed and ran my hands over my face. "Sophia, I know what you're thinking right now," she suddenly said. "You think I'm just like them. You think I've been lying to you all these years, too. You knew the truth and kept silent." She looked at me in such a way that I felt something inside me turn over. "And what did you do, Nick?" Her voice was quieter, but still firm. "You suspected something was wrong, didn't you? You saw that Emma had changed, too. But you turned a blind eye." I clenched my jaw. She was right. I was the one who was pushing those thoughts away. I was the one who pretended that nothing was happening. The silence between us became as thick as a thunderstorm. "So what now?" Sophia finally asked. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there looking at her. There was no cold composure on her face, as Emma was used to. There were no lies, and maybe it was at that moment that I realized why Sophia seemed different to me. She was honest. For the first time in all this time, I was talking to someone who wasn't trying to deceive me. I took a step closer. She didn't back away. I saw her fingers tremble slightly. "Nick, I touched her hand. "Tell me the truth, Sophia," I whispered. She closed her eyes, as if gathering her strength, and then she said, "Emma has always been like her father." And I believed them once too. Her words were like a blade cutting through the last vestiges of my illusions. I had no more doubts, I no longer had a choice. They had all lied to me, but now I had Sophia, and together we would see them through. I was sitting in a dark car parked near the house where Emma had disappeared. All was quiet inside, with only the faint light of street lamps shining through the windshield, casting a dull glare on the dashboard. The phone in my hand was cold. I looked through all the photos I had taken. The building. Her silhouette on the balcony. The man next to her. A man who officially didn't exist. I had gathered enough evidence to destroy their lives, but it wasn't enough for me. When I got home, Emma was already waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her, holding a cup of tea. "You're late," she said in a flat voice. I took off my jacket and came closer. "Work," I answered. She nodded, pretending that everything was fine. But I could see her fingers gently clutching the cup. She knew. She felt that something had changed. I sat down next to her and pulled out my phone. "What are you watching?" I asked, throwing a quick glance at the TV screen. "Just the news." I nodded and opened the gallery. I opened a photo taken just a few hours ago, and I put the phone face up in front of her. She saw it. I noticed how she held her breath. I saw her lips press together a little. "What was that?" I pretended to shrug my shoulders indifferently. "What do you think?" She looked up. Something new appeared in her eyes. It was not fear, it was realization. She realized that I was no longer blind. She slowly put the cup on the table. "Are you watching me?" I laughed, though there was no joy in it. "Oh, darling." I leaned closer, looking her straight in the eye. "If you were honest with me, I would have no reason to." She looked away. "It's not what you think," she began, but I interrupted her. "It is exactly what I think." She clenched her fingers into a fist. "Nick, you don't know what you're getting yourself into." "On the contrary, Emma, I finally do." She looked at me again. "And what are you going to do?" I leaned in even closer, so that I could feel her hot breath. "I'm going to destroy you." For the first time in all that time, I saw her face change. She didn't know how to react. She did not expect this from me, and I was enjoying this moment. The next few days were a game. A game in which each of us tried to outsmart the other. Emma acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled. Her eyes were getting colder by the second. When the recording ended, she looked up at me. I knew they were hiding something. She whispered. I nodded. "Sophia, I need your help." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "What do you want me to do?" Together we made a plan. Emma and her father felt invulnerable. They thought they had everything under control, but I knew how to make them make a mistake. I set up the situation so that they would be exposed. Sophia and I leaked the information to journalists. We gave the documents to the detectives. We created a trap for them, and they fell into it. Everything had to happen quickly. When I looked at Emma for the last time, she didn't know what was coming. She was still smiling. She still thought she had won. But I had already seen the future, and in it, she was losing everything. Everything happened faster than I expected. One moment they were sure they were in control, and the next moment, their lives were in ruins. I stood by the TV, listening to the announcer read out the latest news in a solemn tone. A sensational fraud scheme has been uncovered involving the name of Robert West, a businessman who was officially declared dead 4 years ago. This morning he was arrested in his apartment while trying to leave the country. Footage of the arrest. Police break into his luxury apartment. Robert West is handcuffed, with a stony expression on his face. He didn't even resist. He just knew the game was up. Emma was detained the same day. I saw her face when she was leaving the office, accompanied by detectives. She looked dazed, not like she was scared, but more like she couldn't believe this was happening to her. as if in her perfect little world, there was simply no such option where she would lose. I would like to say that I felt satisfied, that it was easy when I watched her being put into the police car, but the truth was different. I didn't feel anything. I just stood there and watched. It was her choice, and she got what she deserved. A few days later, I was sitting in Sophia's apartment, holding a cup of hot coffee. The TV was still on, although the sound was off. The screen showed footage from the court. Sophia was sitting next to me with her legs tucked under her. "I think I won," I muttered, not taking my eyes off the screen. She looked at me, smiling a little. Finally, someone in this family had chosen the right side. I looked at her, at the woman who also fell victim to this lie. But we survived. We won.